All right, it's been years since I've posted a video, and things have gotten crazy. People want higher wages. Minimum wage is too low, but they also want lots of immigrants to come over who will work for less than minimum wage, thereby driving wages down. You'd think that people would get it by now, but they don't. They also want affordable housing, and at the same time, they want a bunch of immigrants who compete for affordable housing, driving up housing prices. But hey, at the end of the day, none of that's important because it's all about global warming. After all, if the globe becomes an inhospitable place for human life, none of this other stuff really matters, right? Which is why we need lots of immigrants to come from low carbon footprint countries to high carbon footprint countries so they can adopt a lifestyle that's very wasteful and accelerates global warming. Oh, this is just great. Also, we're way too violent here. All these terrible Americans and their guns. That's why we need to take as many immigrants from violent countries and bring them here. That'll really even things out. And it kind of will. But at the end of the day, of course, the real problem is white people. White people are just evil. They need to be genocided, according to university professors. I mean, they're just plain bad. Every single one of them is racist. And you might say, oh, well, they just mean that, it's whiteness. It's the idea of whiteness, which is why we can open up our Texas State University paper and realize that our DNA itself is the abomination. This has nothing to do with whiteness. It is white people. After all, the guy who wrote this, he wrote, white people, I hate you, and you shouldn't exist. Oh, man. I'm sure this is all conspiracy theory stuff. You have never heard of these murderers who have gone around specifically targeting white people because you've been watching mainstream news. How would you hear about this guy in Missouri or this guy in California? That just wouldn't make any sense. And you can say some pretty awful stuff about white people. After all, we are so awful. For instance, you remember that Sarah Jeong or whatever her name is? She celebrated us going extinct. Well, she got her editor job at the New York Times. Now, that's when Candace Owens attempted to recreate all of Sarah Jeong's tweets. She switched the word white to Jewish in all her tweets, and then she got suspended for saying such awful things. And of course, if you take the exact same tweet that is negative about white people and you make it about black people, that's another great way to get suspended from Twitter. Oh, boy. Because at the end of the day, you can't be racist against white people. White people are awful. They're so dangerous. They're so evil. White men are the cancer of today that are hurting everyone. And how could you deny all these white men being these awful, violent thugs that they are? After all, let's look down in Texas, the wonderful multicultural land that it is. Look at this white guy, Anthony Gonzalez. He was he's wanted for murder. And this guy, Juan Carlos Mariscal, he's also wanted for murder. Oh. And what about Ernesto Alonso Garcia? He's also a murderer. These white men, these white men really are causing a lot of problems. And they're not the only ones. How about Nicholas here? And what about Marvin? Gosh, Marvin, if only awful white men like you weren't ruining things for all of us. Oh. And then there's Solomon and Manuel and Alfonso and Ruben and Carlos. And the worst of them all, Philip J. Cruz. These hardened criminals are out there causing all sorts of problems. And it's all because they're white. And that's why we see that 13% of the population commits half of the murders, and it's not white people. In fact, we notice that white Americans seem to commit crimes at similar rates to whites in England, whites anywhere in Europe at all. It kind of seems like white people act like white people pretty much no matter where they are. But, make sure that you don't have any pride in being white. Black pride, hey, wonderful thing. You should have a healthy sense of a racial awareness and pride if you're black, but not if you're white. And you should have a healthy sense of Asian pride and gay pride. But white pride, ooh, now you're a Nazi. I know that doesn't make much sense, considering the fact that the people who fought the Nazis would be considered white nationalists by modern standards. White people who fought the Nazis wanted their countries to remain white. So clearly they had some other disagreement with the Nazis than liking being white. But at the end of the day, this whole white person thing, these evil, awful white people, they will be dealt with. Look at this guy here on the left. Awful, terrible white person. Don't worry. He fought for immigrants, and, well, they paid him back for that. And you got this lady who went down to Haiti to prove how wonderful they are down there. Got raped. But you know what? It's still white men's fault who did this, right? And remember Pippa? She was the Italian. She wanted to prove that all the Muslims in the Middle East are so, wonderful and peaceful. Well, the very first Muslim country she got to, Turkey, raped and murdered right away. Oh, man. Oh, and there's that journalist who, she would go down to Somalia. She was showing how beautiful and wonderful it is. Well, she won't be doing much of that anymore either. But, as quickly as these white people are solving themselves, these evil white people getting rid of themselves, we really do need to help things along. What if we took someone like that one Google shooter and we took her photo and lightened her skin and made her eyes green so she looked more like a European? Mashable already beat us to the punch. They already photoshopped her to make her look white for her news story. Oh, man. They are smart people over there. But we do need to keep the pressure on. After all, white people are awful, and we have to figure out a way to sort of angle this. For instance, Trump's America, 2018, 9-year-old black girl kills herself after racist taunts. Turns out what she was being taunted for is having a white friend. And, well, that's a pretty good reason for someone to die, don't you think? Oh, you know how else we can use the media? We can get white people to stop having children. White people, just stop having children. You'll save the earth. Oh, you didn't have any children? Looks like we'll need to bring in some refugees. Excellent, excellent stuff there. Remember, don't have any more white children. Hey, stop having white children. Would you stop having white children already? Hey, but let's stop talking about race, because, it gets boring. Let's talk about sex. That's the other big thing. Male and female. All corporation boards should be 50% female. The other 50% can be male, but if it's not 50% female, that's discrimination right there. But don't tell people that their babies need a mom and a dad. Otherwise, they'll kill you. Okay, let's talk about race again. Sex is so boring. It's all about race anyway. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I feel like, I'm so awful for being white, I can always rely on Twitter to reinforce me. Fellow white people, just a reminder, all our white heroes are racist. Really hoping y'all will save America from my fellow white people. Fellow white people, we must be stopped. Fellow white people, can we just not for once? Fellow white people, please take some time to be less terrible. To my fellow white people, there's no such thing as reverse racism. The only ones who can be racist are us. Oh, that's so true. No one is racist except for these awful, evil white people. Oh, wait a second. Oh, how did that happen? Don't look at that. That didn't get in here. And you know, it's funny, former senior fellow of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a pro-Jewish organization, he keeps track of the falling white population, like a CEO tracking profits. Now that is great, because after all, we do need open borders. Open borders for white countries. Whites becoming a minority is wonderful. Now, don't say anything like open borders for Israel, because that's anti-Semitism. If you wanted someone to become a minority in their own country, that would prove that you hate them, right? But you know, we really got to cut these wonderful immigrants some slack. You know, sometimes they just don't know what alcohol is like, or they feel bad about the rapes and murders they've committed. But you know, white people, we've given them enough. If they say something or tweet something, it's time to get them out of here. And remember, liking being white makes you an evil white supremacist Nazi. So I hope none of you, of my friends here on YouTube, fall into that nonsense. And while most of the focus is on white men, after all, we are the most evil, remember, white women, you are next. Sometimes you'll look at white men and you'll see our boat is sinking, and oh my goodness, you're sinking along with us? How did this happen? Turns out they don't like you like they don't like us. And if you ever have a wonderful, cheerful family, watch out. You should be on a terrorist watch list. Oh, and this is great. Did you see this? This is current events. We're dealing with current events here, learning all about what's just happening. Elizabeth Warren tweeted out 5 years ago, Michael Brown was murdered by a white police officer in Missouri. Michael was unarmed, yet he was shot 6 times. I stand with activists and organizers who continue the fight for justice for Michael. We must confront systematic racism and police violence head on. So Michael Brown, if you remember, he was a thief. He stole and he pushed around that clerk at the Ferguson Market, right? And that was before he was confronted by a police officer. He attempted to take the officer's gun. If he had gotten that gun from that officer, he may have killed that officer. A black guy killing a white officer. And that would have made Elizabeth Warren very happy, because after all, white men are evil and deserve to die. If only we could go back in time and revert this injustice. A white man lived that day. Oh, man. But at least things are going in the right direction. Isn't it great when white children feel guilt about being born? Isn't it wonderful, this world we live in? And at the same time, all these white people walk around, they say, hey, let's not talk about race, let's not think about race, race shouldn't matter. And it's pretty much only white people who feel that way. Isn't that interesting? Only white people are as altruistic and naive enough to believe that this will work. As white people try and pursue the impossible, they'll condemn their own children to live in their mistakes. But remember this, kids. It's okay to be white. If you're a son or daughter of European blood, it's okay to be white.